Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 144. I'm Enigmius and today we're continuing with the Heracles build. We're working on a spot that's probably going to be one of the more challenging areas for the hangars, at least, to take care of and get done, and then we can move on to other things. This is the transition, and you can see from the inset, just to kind of give you a better idea of what I'm talking about, the top-down view. It's the transition from the outer wall of the large main hangar section, sort of like an S-curve, back to the outer wall of the narrower tubes-like section coming off the back of the hangar. The reason why it's a little bit more challenging than some of the other areas is because we've got that S-shaped curve that we're dealing with, and then we've got the profile of the bulkheads themselves. They're basically flat on the sides, but then they curve in at the top and bottom. So between the S-shaped curve and those top and bottom curves were a lot of compound curvatures that we have to try and work with. And as usual, the idea is not that we have the perfect transition, it's the transition that we can live with. Now, unfortunately, this isn't the kind of thing where I can just say, look at these specific collections of blocks. When we encounter those, we use this specific collection of blocks, and then we end up with the perfect solution. Because one, there's no perfect solution, and two, there's no perfect collection of blocks that we can reference for all the different shapes that we encounter with our builds. What I've found is that after a certain amount of time working with certain blocks, I become a lot more familiar with what I can do with them, and then from that I can come up with potential solutions faster than when I was brand new learning how to work with these different blocks. There are still situations that I encounter on a regular basis where the path to completion is far from evident at the very beginning. We have to take our time, and we just kind of have to experiment with different things until we come up with a combination that works. And usually it's not even a complete design that works. It's like one little wee tiny segment, and I see something and I say, aha, if I duplicate that properly, that's how we will get to the end of this. Sometimes it happens fairly quickly, sometimes not so much. You can see this corner here that we're working on is just combat steel hamburger is really what it looks like. And it's very obviously, I mean, it's a work in progress, and it's kind of placing different things and not even necessarily completing the idea as it goes around. Sometimes it's as simple as placing a couple of blocks and realizing, nope, that's not going to work. And then either I have an idea to replace them with something else, or I don't. And if I don't, quite often I'll just go do something else for a little while. We talk about running out of ideas. It's kind of like writer's block, only obviously we're not writing. Maybe builder's block would be a bit of a pun given the circumstances, but you understand what I'm referring to. It's basically running out of ideas and still deciding to stay in that spot, trying to force something to happen, is not necessarily the best way to go about things, because sometimes you just can't force it, and going somewhere else, refocusing on something else for a little while is sometimes all it takes to free up that block and allow you to come up with some other ideas, see things from a different perspective when you come back to it. And as a result, I can't really think of any part of any ship that I've built in the recent past that I've been truly unhappy with. There's never been a point where I felt like I've released a compromise, so to speak, and just kind of decided to roll with it because it was the last thing that I was trying to fix, and I couldn't get it sorted out. You can see here working on this outside corner, just like that, it's done. It's basically resolved, and we've got this little section down here where we've got a little bit of a block face that's sticking out, and we can kind of work our way through that. But the area above this that we just finished working on went from combat steel hamburger to working sort of compound corner coming around. You see we've got a little bit of an exposed face up towards the top there. Nothing major. I can very much live with that as, you know, call it the nature of the design, or, you know, a necessary artifact. There's so many ways that a person could describe it. I don't even feel the need necessarily to describe it. It's just something that was necessary in order to be able to make that slight transition to a different kind of block that would allow us to work a larger area to a successful conclusion. You could call it a relief line, whatever works for you. It works. That's the bottom line. Now we're over here, we're working on this inside corner, and it's basically the same kind of profile concern we have where it's bending in at the bottom. We've already done the top section, of course, it's all flat on the sides, and now we're doing that bottom section where it bends in towards the underside of the hull at the same time as it's going around a curve, a 90-degree curve basically, to the outer side of this narrower section of the hangar. There's always this kind of hope when I'm doing this kind of thing that something that I just did in the area that I just finished to my satisfaction will be something that we can copy over to this spot and save ourselves some time by not having to think too hard about it, and it usually doesn't work out. In this case, it actually does kind of work out. There will be some similar features that we'll be using, and when it's done, you look at it, there'll be some similar artifacts left behind that I'm, again, very much okay with, given the nature of the circumstance. And it takes us less time to finish off this one particular area, and when we're done, it's just it's one of those weird places on the ship where it doesn't really have to be anything special. You can see we've got a little bit of a relief on the very top, and then the hardest part is, see, I come over and I look, there's a little bit of a transition here where we go from like a 45-degree section to something a little bit more compound. There's a little bit more going on, and it's not quite working. And this was a spot where, as I was going through editing out all the menu stuff, I was looking at it, I was thinking, why did it take me that long to figure it out? But I did figure it out, and it's done. So now all I have to do is duplicate this around to the other 3 sections that have this S-curve with the top and the bottom bending in, and you'll have an opportunity to see that. One of the other things that I wanted to show you just briefly was the transition, or the support structure, whatever you want to call it, between that back section of the hangar where the repair bay would be, that holds on to the upper section of the hangar that's basically dedicated small vessel storage. And that's because I had this idea in my head for sort of this shape. You can see it here. I did manage to put it into place, and the reason why I'm not spending the time to show you, I had it all recorded, but I realized very shortly after I got this in place that I wouldn't be able to use it. It was the shape that I had in mind. I was pleased that I was able to incorporate it, or implement it in the game, but it's the only shape anything like it anywhere else on the ship. There's too many curves. It's kind of like this swept wing design almost, and it just doesn't fit with the way that I had envisioned things. But I wanted to show you, just again, as part of this process, sometimes we do things, we spend a lot of time on them and realize that when we, move away and take a look at it from a distance, that just doesn't work at all. So I came up with something that I think is a little bit more fitting for the design of the ship overall, and we'll take a look at that now. We'll also have an opportunity to take a look around the ship, how it's looking with all the things that we've done since the last episode. Which brings us here, looking at the new and improved structural holding element. It's a lot more straightforward than the original with the swept wing kind of thing. Very, very easy to implement. It wasn't difficult to build, and it looks like it could probably be doing a reasonable job of holding something the size of the small vessel hangar onto the rest of the ship. So just like I did with the swept wing sort of design, I just textured it with the shiny paint, or the shiny metal, so that you can see it a little bit more clearly next to the combat steel. The combat steel has the tendency to act as a camouflage, and if you build something on top of it also in combat steel, it kind of disappears, which is neat, but not very good when you're trying to show people what's going on. You can see that I've closed in most of the hangar walls. The outer hull for the hangar all the way down, all the way up there. This is my little observation ship, and I don't want to fall off, but we'll go over that way. You can see we've basically got it all closed off all the way up to the front section. Not so much on the interior. You can see down there we've still got a lot of work to do, and that's indicative of what's going on through the rest of the interior. It'll take a little bit of time to get it sorted out, but it's not that bad. This is the area that we were just working on. Actually, more specifically, we were working on this lower section. down here, and then we duplicated it up here, and we also duplicated it over there, so that that side is done as well. It's a little bit busy relative to what's going on around it, but that's because of the compound curves doing this S sort of shape and trying to make it work. I'm happy with it. I am also going to be open to new ideas if I should happen to have any about what I could do. But in the meantime, I'm not in any rush to come back here and start pulling things apart and beat my head against the desk trying to figure out what I can potentially do differently in that specific spot. I'm okay with it for now. So the next episode, we're probably going to be spending some time on the port side outer hull. Over here, we've got the bulkheads in place, but we don't actually have any outer hull in place. So we'll do that, and any plates that we're going to be building on top of that, we can also probably put in place. It's a large area, but it's just like so many other things. There's a lot of repetition. It's not necessarily a lot of new stuff that we're going to be doing as we work our way from one end to the other. Once that's all done, we've still got a lot of thrusters that we need to place. I want to do a little bit of work around support structures for landing gears on this side of the ship, because if we should ever find another flat place large enough to land the ship, it would be nice if the landing gear layout kind of looked like it made sense in terms of what was holding what. And then it'll just be painting and texturing, I think. As far as I can think of, weapons we'll have to place, of course, but that's usually not an especially large job. Oh, the structural detailing as well. So we'll call it structure detailing, painting, and texturing, all basically the same thing, because that's what it'll work out to being. And then we'll have a gigantic capital vessel that's a blueprint that only some of you will have permissions to create in your world, but that's not something that's in my power to correct. So if you want to be notified about the next video, as always, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel and or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.